And I'm very excited to have a very dear friend. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay.
Try it again.
Sorry, I for some reason was having reverb and it sounded like a disco. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. A little bit of reverb.
Good. Well, hello everyone. I'm excited to have two of the most amazing women in all today. We obviously have the wonderful Ivy Mix, and we're going to have the wonderful Lynnette Marrero join us in just a few. I'm so sorry if y'all can hear all this crazy feedback.
I can hear. I'm not sure if everyone else can.
But I'm still echoing. I'm not really sure how to get rid of this echo. So, Tess, talk.
You told me Tess. That's hilarious. The other twin.
Ivy.
That's hilarious.
Maybe back for just a second. I mean, that's really what got me going. Your sister has you have a beautiful niece, and I was focused on her earlier. So I'm going to try to figure out this echo.
Maybe if you kind of exit and come back in, and then
yeah.
I'm going to start talking. So everyone, hello. Lynnette and I are really excited to be here and spread this conversation, talking about mentorship and philanthropy and kind of what's happening in the world, and then how it's so important right now to kind of work together and mentor everyone and mentor people. Even if you never thought of yourself as a mentor, now's the time to give it a go. Lynnette, we're all dealing with technical difficulties. Caroline has the echo. Oh, Caroline just left. Lynnette has no internet. I am in my mother's office in central Vermont because I was at a cabin that had no internet at all either. So yeah, here we all. I'm gonna just whip up this thing really quick. You may all notice I'm drinking some Santa Teresa right here. This past year, Tales of the Cocktail, Lynnette and I won. We got this, Ivy. Yeah. Lynnette and I were awarded with the Mentorship Award, which was a huge, huge honor, probably. And yeah, so we were awarded this award. And are you back?
Hi, Echo.
No echo.
That calls for the ham hat. We're just talking about Easter. Said I was going to put it on yesterday. I didn't do any Zooms yesterday. No echo. We're back. And let me just say before you sell yourself short, this was the first ever Philanthropy Award that Tales of the Cocktail has ever given out, and sponsored by Santa Teresa. And I was so happy to find out that it was you two. It was like what y'all have done for this industry and consistently over the last, has it been a decade?
It's going to be, it's a decade in, it's a decade. It's crazy.
That is something, and I think especially now that we see like so many different like great ideas coming up, for y'all to be able to do that with consistency for so long, it's so special, and y'all have touched the lives of so many different people. How many places have y'all been at this point? Do you even know off the top of your head?
So many. Let's see. We used to do just the United States, so many people in the States kind of think that maybe that's the only place that we're at, but pretty quickly we went to London, and we had a bunch of people help us out there for a few years. Haven't been back in a while, but we're going to. But in the last year alone, we did Hong Kong, Australia, Mexico, Canada, and then 8-9 events in the United States. And before COVID was going on, we were going to be doing quite a few more this year.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've loved about what y'all do is you're not only raising money for a great cause. It's something that we try to do. I think we do it well. I think y'all do it well. And I think that's what's beautiful about all of us coming together is y'all create community. And I've got to tell you one of my favorite stories, and I wish Lynnette was on here to answer, but I was invited to go to a bar convent Berlin. And can you hear me? Am I echoing?
No.
Okay, good. And we had walked downstairs. It was my first time at this event. You know, obviously, the wonderful Robin Nance was there, and Lauren Moat was there, and Lynnette kind of had me with her, and we were walking out, and all of a sudden we hear, Lynnette! And it was one of the women who not just she didn't compete, but she actually volunteered for y'all in Australia. And I've literally found, I'm now doing like dates with this like crew in Australia. I've got 12 people wanting to come over for Tales, and it was so awesome. And I was like, it's such a beautiful community that I found some friends that are literally like dear long, lifelong friends through the Speed Rack network. So I think that that's so impactful and bringing together like-minded people.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the best. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk real quick until hopefully we can get Lynnette on here too. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been up to. Now, you've got a book coming out that's on pre-order. Is that correct?
I do, yeah. So this is it. Hello. I got my props ready. This is like, so, you know, when people ask me about my life, I'm like, I've kind of got two things. I've got boobies and women, and then I've got Latin American booze. So, which is great because Santa Teresa fits both of those categories. But yeah, the book's coming out May 26th, I hope. I mean, that's what's coming out. It's very, trying times. It's crazy, but the book is about Latin American spirits in total, kind of from everything from tequila and mezcal that people know a lot about to something as unworldly and unusual as Singani. And I've been saying this a lot lately, but people are like, how do we help the restaurant industry? Like, who do we donate to? What do we do? What do we do this? What do we do that? I'm like, if you have a chef or bartender or anyone who works in the economy and you know they're out of work and they have a book, because it really helps people.
Yeah.
So that, but yeah, people can get it on Amazon, or if you're feeling nice, bookstores are now, not operational. So find your favorite indie bookstore and order it through there.
Absolutely. I know it's a ton of hard work, and everyone thinks that like books just appear, but it's multi-years and tons of work. And for you to do that and to have the bar and to have Speed Rack, you are truly Superwoman. I am in awe, my friend.
Last year when I traveled a lot for the book, Lynnette, I mean, she kept the whole thing afloat with Becky, our events coordinator. I was just like, oh, I'm not going to be there for some of these. And sometimes I was like I flew in and out of Mexico. I came back just to do a Speed Rack and went back to Mexico. And I was just like, it was crazy. But super fun.
I love it. Well, it's important. I think, one of the things that we're doing today is, of course, gathering, and I'm seeing a lot of people. I hope that everyone that's here watching, I see that Christine is on here. I love her, and John. If y'all have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. I forget which way it is on here. And I think that we're going to have Lynnette join via phone in just a few minutes. I'm hoping that that's the case. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, what'd you say?
Is she going to join just via audio, like on a telephone call, or like phone?
Perhaps. I think that they're still working on that. But I know a huge chunk of today, what we wanted to do is really talk about some of the leadership that I know that you and your team have had, especially with, I think today we're highlighting some of the baddest babes from Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are. So as Speed Rack has started to expand, I mean, you put on events, you know what it's like, but Speed Rack is not just like a throw something at the wall and see what sticks. It's like, we've got formats, we've got ordering. It's crazy complicated. So Lynnette and I are lucky enough to have people all over the world who kind of help us. Like Canada's just right there, but like for Hong Kong, we had Vivian Pei and Holly who helped us out over there. Our time difference, like what are we gonna do?
Right.
But in Canada, we have Christina and Evelyn, and they kind of came to us and was like, we want to do Speed Rack in Canada. And we were like, great, because we've done it before with Lauren Moat in Vancouver. And we're like, okay, great. And now they just kind of have taken it and run with it. And, you know, our community is very big, like you were saying, and now we have this global community. And to us, like, I don't want to say we've mentored Evelyn and Christina, but it's just like, there is certainly, like, they're the leaders of the Canadian game, right? So all these other people go to them for this mentorship. Like, all of these people are dependent on them for information, and we just kind of rely on them completely. So I can't wait to have them on and kind of just, you know, chat.
Let's get them on here. I know that John just said even Christina for joint prime minister. I could not agree more. I think it's something that we should push ahead for. Maybe they could even come across to the US and we could have them run here. I don't know how that works. Here they are. I'm so excited to have them on here.
Hi.
Great.
Hi. I think Evelyn will figure it out in a moment. There she is.
No, we are doing it.
Yeah. Women are great at technology, right? We're showing this right now.
Yeah, we got this.
Yeah. Well,
so yeah. Oh, there she is.
she'll come back. She'll come back.
So yeah, I think that what we can kind of chat about a little bit once Evelyn gets on is, why don't you guys tell the story a little bit about how, like, you guys joined together, and like tell your version of the story about how Speed Rack Canada came about and like kind of where we're going.
All right, that's you.
Exactly. So
Yeah, that's you.
I actually have like a miniature love story with Speed Rack. So when I used to live in Vancouver, Speed Rack was only available in the United States. That was like, 5 or 6 years ago. So a bunch of us, myself, Kelsey Ramage, Danny Tatterin, I think there's a few more. I'm killing myself right now for not remembering, but we had written a letter to Lynnette and Ivy asking them whether or not we would be able to participate in the Seattle Speed Rack. And we all kind of like got into cars, drove to Seattle, did our first very sort of like amateur speed showcase in Seattle.
Yeah.
And Danny Tatterin and Kelsey actually got to the top 8, which is amazing. So they're great friends of mine, and it's just really funny to see how everyone's progressed throughout the years. So that was sort of how my Speed Rack story started. And then the first Speed Rack Canada ever came to Vancouver in the International Food and Wine Show. Rocky was there, God bless his heart. So in Vancouver, we did the first one, ran by Lauren Moat and Danny Tatterin. Lauren Moat, obviously, Diageo cocktailian. So that was the first year running it, and obviously she got a little bit busy with her work, and she was sort of looking for someone to take it over, and I just loved it so much, and I didn't want it to go away from Canada, and I think it is a very important event to have, especially with building the industry here. And I had moved to Toronto at that point, not having visited Toronto ever as an adult, so it was just sort of taking a little risk there anyway, but I thought we'd bring Speed Rack back. So contacted Lynnette and Ivy again, and we just sort of went running with it. And the first year was a little difficult because I'd taken sort of the blueprint that they had created for Speed Rack US and placed it in Canada. And throughout the years, we've realized that the markets are completely different. So I turned to Christina, who I do a few other events with, including the Restaurants Canada show, which is actually over a 13,000 person attended trade show. So we curate the beverage program for that. So her and I make a good team, and now we're in our 3rd year of Speed Rack together, which I'm so happy with because it's just grown tremendously every single year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm from Toronto, and I had been doing a lot of fundraising events that bridged hospitality and different women-centered charities, usually shelters or ones that have to do with equality or queer issues. And so I kind of had a lot of experience on that mode of working with brands, working with people, and raising money. And then Evelyn knew and had the connection to Speed Rack, and then it kind of went from there. And as we built it over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's been. There's. Uh-oh,
There we go.
Yay!
Yay!
This is hilarious. Welcome.
That's all that matters.
Welcome, Lynnette, to the conversation. We're just kind of rolling through how we all got involved with Spirit Canada, how it's been going the last few years. And yeah, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I was listening to Evelyn and Christina kind of starting their kind of growth. I think the reason why, obviously we wanted to talk to them is because the way that they've kind of picked up Speed Rack and taken it and grown it in their own perspective is really kind of when we talk about what, the future is, and also, how strongly they are rooted in philanthropy in general in their own community has been a bit of I think why synergistically we've worked really well together. So I know Christina can talk a little bit about all those initiatives that she's been doing for a long time, which I think are a bit about where we talk about how we can all be bigger activists within our community, and then how we can bring that to broader initiatives as well.
For sure. Yeah, one thing that's been really interesting with all the closures is when I first started doing events that bridged hospitality and mostly bartenders with community initiatives, my joke was always that between all the bartenders and people I know, they usually had at least extra $40 or $50 they could put into something to go to something like Speed Rack or to go to an event. Right now, that's very different because of what we're going through with layoffs and quarantine. But the interesting thing is talking to all the different organizations that have a capacity to build and community bridge, and then even the way that a lot of hospitality people have used platforms like Speed Rack or other community initiatives. We've basically given ourselves a groundwork that we could then use to apply to help each other. And you can see a little bit of that happening already with, at least in Canada, we have a lot of food box and food programs that have been happening between not only brands, but people helping each other. We're kind of mimicking other community growth community programs that we've often been the ones that get to be benefactors towards. And now we're using those same structures to help each other. So that's been really great to see, especially up here.
Awesome. Well, that's still pause.
I think it's important to note that, a lot of people come to Christina and I, we sort of just we are not self-proclaimed industry leaders, but a lot of people come to us with questions. And I think the main part of this is to keep sort of an open ear to anyone who has them. I think with us, the similarities that we have is just we want to make the industry better, and we just want things to be better. So even if we do take a little bit of time out of our own sort of busy lives to at least give back in some sort of capacity is so important for growth. And a little bit can be a lot. So we started, in the terms of Speed Rack, we started with, maybe 30, 40 applicants per year. And now we're up to the hundreds, which is amazing. And in Canada, it's so different because our industry is so small and everyone knows each other, which is fantastic. But at the same time, year after year, we're trying to reach a different demographic. So we go to the larger chains that usually don't get involved with more niche cocktail events, or someone who don't necessarily think of cocktail bartending as something that would advance their career. And we've changed their minds that way because we're not afraid to reach out and sort of reach beyond our scope. So I think that kind of contributes to the growth as to what we do in Canada. For sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, conferences aside, what's great about Speed Rack in the States and globally and in Canada is that Speed Rack is a competition, but it's also more than just a competition. It's many different regional congregations that people can then travel and meet at nationally. And you have a lot of people who just travel to the nationals. I went to the last 2 nationals in the States, which was awesome to get that perspective too, to bring back. So we have people who connect with each other, not just because they went on this trip to Mexico together, but because they have this sisterhood and this community. Right. And that makes it easier also for us to check in across the country and to know that also other people are checking in with each other in a way that they can share information that without those structures of something like a speed rack, a lot of these different communities wouldn't be able to communicate as well with each other unless they had that benefit of maybe being able to go to a conference.
Totally. So I want to
you two with regards to that, because you do Restaurant Canada and a bunch of other, you've managed to start working together on other conferences. During this time right now, what do you think the best tools for, one, communicating to the community you already have, and then to that community that you were talking about earlier, the ones who maybe we have to reach a little bit harder? How are you trying to get messaging to them? Are you using other networks like Restaurants Canada and their broader to find ways to communicate and to keep them engaged through this time?
Yeah, RC is both. So Restaurants Canada is basically like our national restaurants association, but based on how they navigate the relative industries, it's probably fair to say that Restaurants Canada is a bit less of the same style of lobbying group as it is in the States. So they've been doing a lot of different webinars. Many of them aim towards ownership, but then they're trying to get into having more articles and things that are based to help workers. They are going to be a primary arm, or one of the primary arms for relief funds for workers, because they have that reach of thousands of members. We've talked to a lot of brands and like helped do some connections so that they as a charity can enforce it. But we still operate in a relatively small world in the hospitality industry. So being able to have great things like the Canadian Professional Bartenders Association and the Bartender Benevolence Fund to distribute funds, a lot of those will often go to more cocktail style or adjacent people. Something like Restaurants Canada, a lot of that will actually go to like a diner waitress in Saskatoon. And it's just trying to use that influence and those connections to try to make sure that that web goes as far as possible at that time. But they've been doing a lot of education, which is great.
Yeah, I think like during these kind of weird times, a lot of content is out there for people to kind of gain knowledge and learn new things that's regarding their industry. But we have like a little Facebook group in Ontario specifically, but it's starting to grow kind of beyond that. And it's called Ontario Bartending Community, not guilds, not like operation, nothing. It's called a community in that sense. So we do a lot of reach outs on that platform. And what Christina and I are actively trying to do is put out content that is not necessarily about cocktails, maybe something that people are afraid to approach, like government policies around like EI and relief measures, and what restaurants are actually going through or what bars are actually going through to have to kind of reopen to operate. So kind of going beyond what we're necessarily really good at. So the cocktailing part of things, the planning part of things, and just sort of try to become some sort of resource for people who have questions about other aspects of their lives.
Working with WSET, like Wine and Spirits Education Trust, there's a lot of things that are on the ground that are going to be opening up to be hopefully a little bit more accessible. Same with, I know Cicerone in Canada has opened it up a bit, and a few other training programs. I think that's what's really important is people, when they find out about opportunities, taking that time to share and figure out ways that they can open it up to as many people as possible. In the fall, I'm director of programming for Toronto Cocktail Week, which is run by a media company. It is theoretically still going to happen because it's in October. But one of the things that I started the conversation with them early on is finding ways that we can pivot the events that typically showcase individual bars. Like I can't approach a bar because what's a bar right now? So I can't do some of those programming that I would normally do for the big marquee events, but figure out ways that when I am able to approach these people, if we can do some sort of profit sharing method, or if we can have a bigger stipend to offset their costs, and just try to not only getting contract, like a lot of people are really focusing, like people who have influence, focusing on getting the contracts because everyone's so worried about themselves, but also figuring out a way that you can still get your money, but maybe you can like shift what the conversation is. Like I can shift the conversation to say, we still are going to do this opening gala, but like, how can we do these numbers so that it doesn't look tone deaf when we approach people? Like, how can we support it? And how can we start that conversation with the brands? and our different stakeholders now, rather than really trying to work on it and then all of a sudden in August getting blowback because people are like, we just opened and you want us to do what for free? Like, so just things like that. I think people can be a little bit creative with how they're positioning themselves, and that benefits everything.
Excellent, I agree. So I also wanted to ask you guys, and for people out there who are watching, so for instance, like we usually do Canadian regional events, right? And now this year, like, are we doing regional? What's going on with regionals? The people want to know. Are we still feeling, I'm still feeling extremely confident about, even if someone like feedback in general, not just Canada, has been a little, like we had to postpone our last event here in DC. We obviously had to postpone the finals that are supposed to be in 2 weeks or something, you know? So we're changing all these things, but what do you think about this season of Canada?
I think what we're going to do is push the dates back a little bit and just sort of play it by ear. Like I mentioned earlier, I think SpeedRec is such an important event just for the course of growing the community in Canada, especially. So it would be pretty disappointing if we can't do regional. So I think we're just going to like pivot and see how it goes. Yeah. The plan for this year is that we were going to partner up with Toronto Cocktail Conference to host the national finals then, which is in August. But right now, with the uncertainty of the next 3 weeks or 3 months, we're not quite sure sort of how to deal with, you know, drinks being passed around or people's comfortability being outdoors and around a large group of people. Mm-hmm. So I think all we can do is pivot and try to kind of
which is not to say that our intention isn't to do something during Toronto Cocktail Conference. It was just that right now the intention has to shift from nationals to likely Toronto regionals and then nationals to shift later. Yeah. There's a utility in Toronto. Wow. Canada is very large and all the major markets are very far from each other. They're like the closest two markets are Montreal and Toronto, which is a 6-hour drive. So having regionals really gives people something to get together and to, even if it's small, and it might just be like a growing year instead of having to have these blowouts where we're doing all these auctions and people are throwing around money. That's not the aim is still to raise money for the charity, but the aim is not necessarily to break the records from the year before, but to lean into these, almost like treat it like a building year again and give people that ability to be together and to like work on their skills and to like just showcase talent. Our charity partner too is getting hurt quite a bit by this. It's like Breast Cancer Support Fund. So they basically give the supports that people need when they're going through breast cancer. So that could be like helping with mortgage payments, helping with childcare, certain styles of prescription drugs they might need, really anything. So those are all the extras that are hard that people don't always think of in the cost of, I mean, I guess people do, but especially hard now when probably people are going down to 0 income homes instead of like one very small income home. And there's a lot of extra money floating around in people's pockets to give to almost any charity. So it's something to really think about, like the impact of any money raised right now will be even more significant after this, because a lot of charities are losing out on 1 to 2 quarters of including all their marquee events that they use to float the rest of the year. And a lot of them have been locked into event contracts that they've just lost money on. So that's just something for people.
Yes, they have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is something that we've been thinking a lot about. You know, how do we? I mean, there's so many philanthropic efforts out there for COVID right now, right? Like, I saw you guys posting some stuff about opportunities for bartenders and restaurant staff in Canada. Here in the States, we have like the USBG. We have a bunch of grants and things that for bartenders and hospitality people, but they're almost all shut down right now because too many people have applied for them. But yeah, but it is really interesting that all these other philanthropic efforts are still out there and they do need the funding, and like people are still dying of breast cancer. You know, people are still going to the hospital with breast cancer. We've been hearing all sorts of stories from our charities about people, you know, like if you have to go in and get radiation, you still have to go in and get radiation, you know?
A friend of a friend just went through remission from a very like a very sudden stage 4 case of cancer. And it was interesting because reading that story, you forget that part of the reason why we have to stay inside and support our healthcare workers is because they don't have less work than what they were doing before. It's not like everyone decided to have COVID instead of having cancer. It's like everything's still happening at once. So I think that people sometimes forget that, like there are still people going through all their, like these are not elective treatments that a lot of people need. If they stop having the treatments, they die. But there are also people who are incredibly vulnerable to sickness and everything. So, I mean, we have to obviously, like, if we're not whole, like, we can't help everything. So we have to focus a bit on ourselves and our health, but also just looking forward, like impact will mean something. We're lucky up here because we're all getting a bit more government supports, at least as individuals, which takes off some of that stress and pressure that a lot of people in the States have. And I don't envy that.
Yeah, it's nuts. So, but before we say goodbye to you guys, I want to ask you a question too. People are constantly asking us, Lynnette and I, they're like, I want to bring speed back to this place. Can you give any advice to people about like how you think you've gained such success, both like with, I mean, I think that we're lucky, the Canadian bartending community is so strong. And I think that that's so great that the support system is already kind of Canadian, you know, and in there, but do you have any recommendations or advice for other people around the world who might bring speed back to them? Like how, just like what you might want to do and the benefits?
I think a big part of it is that like you, a lot of people want to take on a lot all at once. Like I definitely, when I did coordinated speed rack on my own, like I realized how much of a beast it was because you're no longer just someone who's coordinating an event. You're dealing with talking to brands, dealing with nonprofits and charities. You're dealing with a lot of funding. There's a lot that's involved where you will need a lot of help with, and you don't necessarily recognize the scope of it until you're deep in it. And also becoming a speed rack coordinator also automatically kind of puts you into like mega bar mom status. So now you have this like crazy like network of amazing female bartenders that look up to you, and you're like, okay. So you got to be kind of aware as to like how you present yourself, like what you speak to, the beliefs that you believe in, like whether or not it ties into kind of your system holistically. So there's a lot to think about. I think it's fantastic. I think every country should have this feedback, but again, like, does your market, is your market there yet? You know, I think for the first year we were kind of looking at different cities and their industry hasn't necessarily grown to a point where even 16 ladies would apply for it, just because, you know, it comes from like nervousness or like intimidation of the whole watching speed rack in the US and how big it's been. But I think the biggest thing is, you know, if you do get into it, keep pushing and keep working on it, because every speed rack develops a little bit differently. I'm sure Hong Kong is drastically different than the UK, drastically different than here. And just like knowing sort of what your market demands are and what you need to do to allow for speed rack to succeed in your own brand market.
I would also add to treat it like an event and with production, that like, because that's something that a lot of people are really well-meaning, especially on bar side in our industry. But like, if you've never had to negotiate with venues, if you've never had to deal with AV, or if you've never had to deal with insurance, if you don't know what it's like to do like run of shows, like you still have to do those, and you reach certain limits on just based on goodwill or calling in favors. So the more that you have that mentality, and for the, if you do regionals or whatever, like the smaller ones, it's a little bit easier, but for your marquee, it can't just be like everyone's here to have a good time. It's a little bit different than like something that's just created to have a few shots and to create content that can then be shared. So it's just to be very aware that you have to have that mentality. And that doesn't mean you can be the person who does some of the other things in the outreach and just get somebody who's better at the boring stuff, you know, and like, because that's actually really important. And that's also something that helps if you're going to be an organizer, not just somebody who like gets people excited to do it.
I feel like that goes for everything in life, right? Like, like get you someone who likes to do QuickBooks or something, you know?
Yeah.
For sure. I want to make sure that, does anyone in the audience have any more questions for us at all that we can ask our lovely Canadian matriarchs? Canadian matriarch, I like it. And if not, Lynnette, do you have any more questions for these ladies?
No, I think you ladies are killing it. I love seeing all the different initiatives that you're posting. So to all the health and wellness initiatives, I think, right now as leaders in our communities, it's important to be helping shed light on those other initiatives. And it's great to see that, we've seen people like Tess Sawyer running her organization that is focused on more bartenders leaving in the U.S. We've been able to do that with helping push Amy Ward in the health center. But I just kind of love seeing the camaraderie of coming together and supporting all the initiatives while we can. And that's part of mentorship, is paying that forward. And you just kind of both struck me a little bit there talking about, how expansion and how you learn to build these families. And I think we've learned as much from you all about how to become good managers or mentors when you bring other people on, and you have to giving up and letting go is one of the hardest things. But when you learn to trust in others, that they have it and they can take it, there's nothing more freeing. But that process takes time, and I think we can all kind of identify with that a little bit, especially because our industry is so creative and so much about who we are. So that pass along yourself and your soul and your identity to others to go run with it can be hard, but it's extremely freeing. So thank you both for taking our baby and growing it in a foreign country in a healthy and prosperous manner.
We're so
we love you, ladies. Lynnette and I will chat a little bit about U.S. stuff for anyone who's out there, but we love you and stay safe up north.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry. That's
Bye. All right, Lynnette.
Hi.
This is an interesting day. So I wanted to say, so yeah, I want to. I was just trying to say it before, but for everyone out there who's watching this, you will see that I have this awesome bottle of Santa Teresa in front of me. And while we just talked momentarily about the breast cancer philanthropic activities that SpeedRack does, we also need to focus in on ways that we can help. So one of the reasons why I'm drinking this today, I'm drinking an old fashioned at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because I have a hangover from Easter, and this is helping me get through. Yeah, Santa Teresa's, not only did they award Lynnette and I last year at Tales of the Cocktail, but they also are donating $500 to our breast cancer charity, the Pink Agenda. And for every dollar that y'all spend out there that donate, and I'll put a link in right here into the comments. Every dollar you guys donate to the Pink Agenda, this crew at Santa Teresa is going to match up to additional $500 because we usually raise at each speed rack like $15,000, $10,000 to $20,000, and that's a lot of money for our charities. And now we're raising none. So if you can donate, we'd really appreciative. And the folks at Pink Agenda who we're benefiting today are really good friends, and they do some of the best work out there. Anyway, on that note, Lynnette.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit. I think last year at Tales, it was really wonderful. I participated in a panel with Alberto Fulmer from Santa Teresa, and we talked about things that we don't always know. I think what other brands are doing within their communities. And I know Venezuela obviously is a country that's been going through a lot over the last few years, and then through a pandemic on top. But Alberto runs a project called the Project Alcatraz. And I think, we've seen some kind of programs like this, and what he was working with was to engage the gang members, which are usually a bunch of, in their community, a lot of young men who are, cast out, get in the wrong crowd, and don't have healthy ways for getting out of that life from the cartels. And what they started to do was to use sports and getting together to play rugby to fix these gang relationships, and that way to get them out of that life. And they also offer work at the hacienda for these men who want to get out. So I think it kind of shows a really example of, as community, you can find ways to rehabilitate people and open up your space with kindness and with, group organization. Our sport is speed bartending, but it brings together all these women as a community rather than as just individuals anymore. And that's just kind of an inspiring conversation. So thank you, Santa Teresa, for that inspiration and for believing in our community today, who we want to support. Again, the Pink Agenda has one of our favorite researchers who does incredible work on the forefront. As we can see right now, research for medical is really important, and supporting the community who's struggling right now is important. So thank you for giving us spotlight on other things. And Tails, thank you so much for bringing us together and allowing us to have time to talk with. It's just great, I think, to see our global community connect like this today. And I saw it when you had Lauren on with Jackie and Amy, and thank you for this opportunity just to kind of get together and put minds to what we can do. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to figure out now is, as we all kind of figure out how we come out at the end of this, I think we all will evolve and change, but I think our community through these kind of platforms has really stepped up to find ways to keep connected through this.
Especially on a global level, I think as well. I mean, as you said, there's no one in the world who isn't being affected by this. And I think that, Speed Rack has always been this like a global connector. Like we have, a woman in Vietnam who competed in Hong Kong can go to Mexico and connect with someone in the FA, and they have this Speed Rack bond. It's like this is sorority, for lack of a better word. And I think it's really awesome to see in these times, like what Speed Rack, we were like, you and I are on all these text threads, and from different cities, from different years, and people are constantly communicating still, being like, hey, how are you ladies? Like, how are you? And it's just really uplifting, I think. So yeah, I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. We've got like 3 minutes. If you do, type one into the side there, and we can answer them for you. But in the meantime, I think that, as far as Lynnette and I are concerned, Speed Rack is serving usually our philanthropic, yes, you can call us mom. But yeah, our philanthropic thing right now is just community support. And I think that that's really excellent. Oh, you're welcome, Beth. So sweet. Lynnette, you can't see in the comments. They're very nice. They're very uplifting. This is what I'm talking about. But the world is so uncertain, and then you have just moments of levity and love, and I think we just really need that right now. And Speed Rack has been a good catalyst for that worldwide. I think it's awesome. And we don't know what's happening with Speed Rack with any events. None of us know anything, but everyone should rest assured that we will certainly be back. There's going to be a time when gathering in rooms with 400 of your closest friends is totally okay, and it will be, and we'll get back to hugging and backing the rack, and look forward to days like that when things seem, dismal. Let's see, looking at questions. There's no questions. Anyway, Carolina, any questions from you back there?
Well, I just want to say thank y'all for being on today. I mean, it's always a pleasure when I have an opportunity to be with y'all. These two women go above and beyond. They respond, they're here, they show up. And I'm just honored to call each of y'all friends. And I'm really excited too that the Spirited Awards regionals come out tomorrow. I know that both of you are judges for that, and so I hope that everyone will tune in tomorrow, because I think that's going to be great, and I can't wait to see who wins the philanthropy award this year.
Seriously,
it's exciting, and it's such a great. I think it was such a great addition, and it was a complete surprise to us last year. But I think this year more than ever, I think we talked about it earlier in our preview, celebrating our community and finding moments that we can all celebrate and feel connected. So thank you for persevering, and for tomorrow for all of us to cheer each other on and to see the great work of the awesome bars and bartenders and brand ambassadors and everyone who's been, making 2020 and 2019 great so far. And we'll forget about this little blip that's maybe a little challenging. But it'll be great. And what time is that tomorrow? And where can we find it? On the Instagram?
It is going to be on the Instagram. It will also be on our website. And I don't know what time. Someone from the tail said I was like, I don't know what time. I should know what time. But it is coming out tomorrow.
Time is kind of irrelative right now.
Right?
It'll be there.
It'll be there.
We'll be posting it on our Instagram stories too.
For sure. Back to normal, where can everyone find you to in case someone's living underneath a rock and doesn't know where to find y'all?
Well, when this is all said and done, you will hopefully find me anywhere in the country on a book tour, but who knows? And if not there, I will probably just be at Leyenda, pretending like we just opened again. That's the joy of this. I get to open my same bar twice.
I'll be with the Llama Inn and Llama San family in Brooklyn and Manhattan, getting back to Ivy's point, reopening a restaurant twice in a year. If you don't see my face around Instagram with masterclass, I'll be around through Speed Rack. So hoping that our next two events, as soon as we are able to rebook, you'll find us. But part of this time is you can always reach out to us on our Instagram or on our Facebook page, especially right now. If there's questions you have or things you want to know about, this is a time to ask those questions and reach out to people. And if you're trying to figure out what your next step is, where you want to go, and you just need a ear to talk to, drop us a message, and if we can give you some advice, we will.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for coming on today. I hope that you'll tune in next week with us. I hope that you'll join us tomorrow for the Regional Spirited Awards announcements. And we're all in this together. Love y'all.
Love you. Bye.
Bye-bye.